The square puts a boundary, a sense of different kind of boundary on things.
And it also has to do with ability. Nature can do circles very easily. Humans find it very difficult. To build a circular wall, even from stones, in the old days, it is not as easy as building a straight wall. Because to build a straight wall,
And a circle communicates different kind of connectedness. That I think we struggle to do. With,
I mean, in ancient construction, like it is today, we want to, build a straight line. We string a line, straight wall, string a line, take any rope, string it in the 2 points, and you got a straight line. I'm trying to think what it takes to actually, with very little tools, make an arc. It's really difficult. I mean, yes, you can put a peg and put a piece of rope and a stick and mark it, but you will be on that mark. There's nothing you can actually constantly keep in place. If you see bricklayers, we'll see the stringing lines all the time.
I wonder why the Egyptians go for the triangle, right? In terms of pyramids. And triangle is so prominent in a lot of culture and stuff. This whole what's that thing?
The pyramid?
No, the thing that supposedly Beyonce and her husband is a part of.
Oh, the Illuminati?
Illuminati.
Okay.
It's
The
same
same
thing.
You're all seeing the watchers.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's it going? Welcome back, travelers.
Some people.
Sick people. Well, you're traveling too, right?
I was traveling.
Yeah, we said three more this next week. And the week after. So winding down. I've got a meeting. I've got to get on the phone with Deborah at 1:30. So I thought it's a little late for lunch, but if we can make that the lunch break. We can maybe. You guys munch anyway. So, and then you can use the lunch to finalize the graduation ceremony pieces.
Michael's got it all figured
Perfect.
We're doing silence the whole time.
I like that. I'll agree to whatever you decide.
So let's sit in silence.
Why am I not surprised?
Did you see the look on his face?
Doesn't like that. He wants more structure. Silence. We're going to open up to the spirit, and we're going to sit in silence. We're just going to acknowledge each other just by looking, seeing the humanity in him. Just be
We'll
with
have
it in silence.
individual supervision at the end.
Mhm.
And we've got everybody but Michael as a verbatim. Is that right? You got a didactic? Yes. All right. Questions? Usman. And we'll talk about
Not always an email thing.
yeah. Who has not paid tuition?
Oh, boy. I don't know why it's taking me so long this time. Last time I did it early.
Last time I paid at the graduation.
Me too. Well, I only paid half at the beginning and half at graduation.
My financial.
Tell your accountant to
To the chair.
guys send me all your writing so far.
Yeah.
But you guys have not. So we'll do that. All right. First verbatim.
Who's up?
Did everybody have it printed?
This Monday's ready.
This one's ready. All right.
Make it happen. Keep it short. Let's see how many pages you have.
400.
Okay. So, email Jose is a janitor in the activities building where religious and education programs are held. He's Hispanic, quiet, and has a reputation for being easygoing and responsible. Jose also sings in the choir and appears to be religious, regularly participating in various Protestant programs. So he's Protestant, he's about 29. Over the past few months, he's been either showing up late for work and sometimes missing work due to illness. I was getting a bit frustrated and planned talking to him about it and possibly informing him that he could lose his job. However, because of my workload, I never got around to sitting him down to talk about it. When I came to work one Monday morning, I saw his name on the end of shift report from the weekend. Usually when I come to work every day, I would read the end of shift report to see what happened during second and third shift after I leave. And the report indicated that his mother came to the visiting room drunk and was sent back home. I was relieved he was not in any trouble, as he would have lost his job if he picked up a ticket. I cleared my schedule and made time for him that morning to talk about it and see how he was doing. Jose claims he was punished unfairly by law enforcement because he was involved in a shootout and a long car chase with the police in New Britain. He said he ran because he was afraid of them and he had no gun. He has been incarcerated for about 5 years and has close to a decade left in his sentence. So preparation and memory shows. As I prepared for the meeting with Jose, I felt a bit guilty for not checking in with him much sooner. I have been reading and exploring ideas around trauma-informed care and how, so I named it TIC, how the TIC lens redirects the question from what is wrong with the person to what happened to the person. And as I reflected on my inner thought process, it became clear that I was functioning in the what is wrong with you mindset. My goal was to hear his story and try as much as possible to support him in any way I can. So observations. He came to work and went about his task quietly. I watched him closely and could see that he was carrying a huge burden on his shoulders. Although he acted normal, I could sense he was in pain and seemed tired. I informed him privately that I saw the email and inquired about the incident. I offered to make time for him to talk that morning, as soon as he took care of the program sheets and other tasks in the morning. He happily obliged and smiled gratefully. So this is the verbatim section. C1 is me and I1 is him.
I don't see we have an introduction. Want to read that?
Okay, so I asked the other workers to give us some time alone. As Jose enters the office, I closed the door behind him and offer him a seat. I offered him the more comfortable chair. He offered it back to me out of respect, but I insisted and he smiled and sat down.
Be you. How are you doing? I saw the email this morning and was worried at first. I thought you got a ticket. How are you holding up?
I'm holding up. There isn't much to do. I can't let it get to me like that. You know what I mean.
He looks down and shakes his head before leaning back on the chair.
I think I know what you mean. It's hard to get space to process that stuff in the dorm.
Yeah. It's tough with 90 people in your business. You have to suck it up. You know what I mean? I just have to keep it moving. You feel me?
Yes, I feel you and see why it's hard. But keeping it real, how are you doing? What's really going on inside?
He heaves a sigh of relief and closes his eyes for a bit and takes long breaths. I tap him gently on his shoulders and we hold hands for a few seconds.
Take your time, man. Take all the time you need.
Thanks, Iman.
He successfully fights back the tears.
It's a lot of things at once. I was already in panic mode before they called me down to the lieutenant's office. I knew she was coming to visit because I called home that morning and she seemed fine. So I got ready after chow and waited for the count to clear. Usually they call me up at 1 p.m., but I kept waiting and waiting for half an hour. Then an hour, and I began to get worried. I checked with the CEO. He said no one came to visit me. Then I called her phone, but she wasn't picking up. So my mind was thinking all kinds of thoughts because my mom has been sick, you know.
His voice trails off a bit and he stops talking. I reach out to him again and we hold hands again longer than the first time.
That must have been hard being in that situation and not knowing what was going on.
He shakes his head again.
You know, I had that sinking feeling you get when you're about to receive bad news. The minute the CEO called me to the bubble and told me they wanted to see me at operations, I could barely walk straight as I left the building to go see the LT. It was crazy. I prayed I never had to receive bad news from home while I was still incarcerated.
I cannot imagine what was going through your mind as you walked down to operations. How did you keep it together?
You know, as bad as it was walking down, the worst part was when I got to operations, and there were so many CEOs there just chilling and no one paying attention to me.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I don't really follow.
I got there and they made me sit there and wait. No one said anything to me for over an hour. I even missed count. I sat there panicking. After all these crazy thoughts, and cops were just joking around and treating me like I didn't exist. You know, they got nothing good to say to you when they call you operations. It's one thing when a CEO gives you a ticket. At least you know why you're there and you can start planning your excuse and how you're going to fight it. But I didn't get a ticket, so in my mind I was thinking someone died and I was freaking out, thinking I was going to get a panic attack. And they just left me out there like they didn't send for me.
Wow, now that you broke it down like that, thinking about the emotional storm you were in just makes me want to meditate. How did you manage not to lose it?
Imam, I was very close. I prayed throughout, but it got to a point where I knew my prayers had limits. I was beginning to think some bad thoughts when they finally called me in.
I heave a sigh of relief and shake my head.
Yeah, they took their sweet ass time and made me wait for an hour. You know, the funny thing about it, they didn't even know the difference between being drunk and having serious mental illness. You see, my mom doesn't drink. I think it's weird because she was an addict, but she never liked alcohol. Drugs were her thing. Now that she is all of the messed up shit she'd been through, the drugs, the abuses are finally taking a toll on her health. She started hearing voices and seeing things about 10 years ago, but she could still function, especially when she takes her medication. I was usually around to make sure she did, but lately she has been somewhat isolated, and I suspect she has not been taking her meds regularly, so she was acting wild and saying crazy things during the visit. They thought she was drunk. I was just glad that she was okay and nothing happened to her. At that point, I was so relieved, and all the anger and pain for making me sit around and wait just went away.
I am so sorry to hear about all of the stuff you've had to deal with.
Thanks, Imam. I appreciate it. I know I let you down sometimes when I don't show up for work, but some days it'll be hard to get up and do stuff after I talk to my sister. She tells me about my mom having an episode. My sister's fed up. It's just me and her, and not having me around means she has to do everything.
He slumps back on his chair and takes deep breaths.
I can see you are carrying all of these burden on your shoulders, and I can also sense guilt in your voice and your body language because you are here and you cannot help them.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I feel really guilty for being in here and not doing my part. I'm the only man in the family. My dad left when we were young. Never really had a relationship with him. I actually heard that he's in jail somewhere in New Haven or Bridgeport. He's an addict, so I have given up hope for ever having a relationship with him.
I am sorry to hear that. It must be hard to come to that conclusion. conclusion.
It is what it is. I just don't want to be like him. That's why I never touched drugs. I sold drugs to make money, but I never used it because I saw what it did to my mom and dad. I didn't want to get caught up in it.
Yes, I can rationally process that, and I think it is a good decision.
Thanks, Imam. I know you don't think you're doing a lot, but this helps, and I appreciate it.
I am sorry I did not reach out to you sooner. I would really like to help you in any way I can. I heard you are doing sentence modification. Is there anything I can do, like write you a good work report?
Yes, that would really help. It's funny you mentioned it. I was thinking about asking you for one, but because I've been showing up late, I was afraid to ask you.
Yeah, you better not mess with me. I have mad swag, and you don't want me to roll up on you like the average.
Avengers.
The Avengers. You feel me? God, tough words.
It cracks up and we both laugh for a few seconds.
Nah, but seriously, come on. Talk to me whenever you deal with stuff
Wait a
like
minute.
that.
That's me.
Oh, that's sorry.
But seriously, come talk to me whenever you deal with stuff like that. It's why I am here. I know I have been busy, but I will certainly make time for you. I understand you feel bad because you came late few times, but overall, you are a very good worker. When you are here, you get the job done, and I like that you pay careful attention to details. You really do good work.
Thanks, Imam. That meant a lot.
You are welcome. I will do the work report for you today.
Thanks again, Imam. I appreciate it.
The program was a signal to me that it was time for chow recall, and we ended our meeting. So summary, overall I thought it was a productive session. I was able to create space for the care receiver to talk about some of his feelings. We did we did not have time to process any of it, but I plan to do regular follow-ups with him and develop a care plan in the coming weeks. So I did a level 2. So psychological dimensions. A lot of research has been done on the psychological impacts of incarceration. The terms institutionalization or prisonization are often used to describe the often negative and enduring psychological consequences of incarceration. One obvious dimension that seemed evident is how the nature of confinement not only imposes restrictions on the incarcerated physically, but those restrictions extend into the social, intellectual, and emotional realms. It is very hard to get care receivers in prison to do the emotional stuff in the housing units, and this often has the potential to undo many of the work chaplains do in more private settings for short periods of time. Sociological dimensions. The sociological dimension typically encompasses inmate culture, staff culture, the institutional culture within which inmates and staff interact, as well as the wider social setting in the countries and regions all of these occur. I thought that the lack of sensitivity displayed by staff members in the operations building in a lot of ways captures the essence of the sad and depressing sociological reality of prisoners in this country. It was the most difficult part of the interview for me as I encounter similar scenarios regularly in prisons. Theological dimensions. The main theological dimension for me is centered on the question of the abuse of power and the dehumanization that flows from it on the one hand, and the need to counter that with a caring and compassionate spiritual care presence in prisons. An obvious challenge is the question of how chaplains can help draw attention and hopefully concrete action on changing the sad and humiliating culture of dehumanizing prison inmates. Cultural dimensions. Two main issues arise as I examine this dimension. Jose is Hispanic from a poor family in New Britain, and given his family situation, he experienced negative institutional contact very early. He also comes from a growing number of poor and marginalized people who have family and close friends already in the system, and is somewhat at ease with this reality. I was moved by the way he talked about his dad as an addict who was and is now incarcerated. He also mentioned that many of his relatives went to prison and that he was exposed to police and institutional control from an early age. The powerful intersection of race, poverty, crime, and institutional power is a familiar narrative in the lives of many prison inmates. Political considerations and power dynamics, boundaries, and stuff. I tried as much as possible to use receptive power and create an environment for the care receiver to use their own power even if they are not aware of it. Part of the prison experience often entails a profound sense of powerlessness among inmates, so just offering a listening ear and holding the space to express painful emotions goes a long way in this regard. So critique. One criticism will be ensuring I have adequate time for these sessions. I wish I had the skills to better navigate and uncover some of the traumatic elements in his life as we learn to shift the question from what is wrong to what happened. The spiritual assessment, I use 5 at this time. So faith. Jose is Protestant and appears to take his faith seriously. He is active in the church and the choir and is known by all the chaplains and volunteers as a person of faith. Importance and influence of his faith. So far, it appears that Jose's faith has a major impact on his lived experience. It appears to shape and influence his decisions to stay out of trouble while incarcerated, even if he does not fully understand the extent of this influence. Community. Most of his friends are from the choir and are active in Protestant programs. His closest friend in the housing is also a leading figure in the choir. An address. It appears Jose wants a sympathetic ear and someone who validates some of the good work he does. So I didn't do any formal documentation. Care plan opportunities for future care. Since the care receiver works in the religious service area, I'm able to check in with him regularly. Overall, his mood appears to have improved. However, I still watch him closely for any signs of unrest or heaviness. I plan to have a formal session with him every month. Jose seems optimistic about the sentence modification. However, I suspect that if it does not go well, along with other personal and family struggles, it might be a major challenge for his faith. So with regard to the psychological, sociological dimensions, I wasn't sure. I was looking for, we did a level 2, I think it was last unit. I didn't find that verbatim to sort of use that as a guide to develop in mind. So I don't know if the way I approached it was helpful.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if mine was a good example.
I remember it was detailed back then, and I thought it was.
You remember it was detailed? Talking about shovel.
Yeah.
Have you ever had something from shovel that was not detailed?
For the commentary.
It's only a compliment.
Did it feel like a compliment?
Oh, yeah, it's okay. Come see, come saw. Didn't really care, but it's kind of all good fun.
I heard a no and a deflection.
I wasn't intimidated. It was just fun. It was just kind of.
I heard him
Fellowship.
saying, his mic is all good. It's strange. So.
I don't know if come see, come ça is the best way. It's French, so come see, come ça probably resonates differently.
But that's shifted from your,
Well, now you're trying to put it on me.
cause it is about
Okay,
you.
the floor is open.
You're in the hot seat.
See, you rescued me. You attacked me. You rescued me.
It's very fucking
I want to honor your. This is your time. No, I think you did. Yeah, the psychological, primarily, just to focus on emotions is kind of a good starting place. And if you did do that, it could. You start with, the psychological impacts of incarceration, institutionalization, prisonization. How it's always better to be more specific. So what about the impact of this stuff on Jose and how that showed up in prison, and also your own. So one thing that's not as clear in level 1, certain questions are about you, and certain questions are about your receiver. And level 2 doesn't really differentiate explicitly, but it's always about everything, the first level obviously is the care receiver, but the deeper level that's explicit in level 1 is, okay, now focus on you. What's going on with you? Level 2, it's understood that they're actually a pair. And the idea of resonance, Dan Siegel talks a little bit about resonance as the impact of one person or one system on another, and pastoral care, spiritual care is always relationship. So Jose brings up stuff, it resonates with you, you bring your own self, and that impacts your initial interaction, and over the course of any conversation, you're impacting each other, and that's the resonance, a connection, of link, care. So that's a long-winded explanation. It's always the combination, the interaction of both.
He said, "You feel me?" in the beginning, and then you picked up on that later when you joked with him in a really cool, confident way that you were just being yourself, being Usmanto. And I think that had a psychological thing there. That saying that you you fed back the same cultural idea. And psychologically, I think it just showed that you were in the same place.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of that feedback. Feeling felt, it comes from empathy, it comes from, you did a lot of that early on.
Holding his hands.
Yeah.
Throwing his back.
Yeah.
Rubbing his knee.
Must have been hard,
Yeah.
can't imagine naming feelings, and then you said at some point, exactly, that's exactly how I feel. So, feeling felt, that's a first level, and then when he says, when he names it, says exactly, then that helps you to continue to engage. And you meet each other, right? So I thought you did really well with that. It's the level of competent, conscious competence and unconscious. It's not necessarily a straight line to unconscious competence, because being explicit here, what did you do? Why did it work? Reinforces what you could have done different, or what it was like for you to have more control and more skill. Like you said, you want more skill in the process as you continue to reflect and get better.
Like one of the sources of trauma that we all have is not being seen. It's a form of psychological neglect. When he came into the waiting for that hour, he wasn't seen. And so, I thought this was like a really strong verbatim and session. And I certainly don't think I would have done any better. So if this was my own, I would look at it and say, okay, so that's a common source of trauma of not being seen. And then once again, as an adult, he's not being seen. So then, just the typical how did you feel? Well, he always said how he felt when he might have pursued it instead of when other to something neglect in childhood and things like that.
Could you respond?
Yeah, I actually I didn't think of that part. The whole thing actually surprised me because I expected a more conventional kind of very similar to grief counseling, just checking in. And so he threw I mean the whole thing changed when he started talking about his experience at operations. Wasn't the part that I envisaged, even though we all recognize that that happens a lot in prisons, but it's just something that and maybe we've come numb to it. And just the way he honed in on that area, that was the main part for me. Because apparently he's been dealing with his mom's mental illness for a while, so that wasn't new. But for some reason, when he was called down there, because typically when they call you to operations, it's either you have a ticket or you're in trouble, and sometimes to do a peace test to go to the halfway house. But it wasn't anywhere close to going home, so he knew that wasn't the case. So it was either bad news. He didn't have a ticket, so it had to be bad news. So he was freaking out and just going there, having to deal with that. And I know how that area looks. You have officers hanging out. We have a small room called the Sugar Shack, where they get coffee and stuff. And people laugh around, they joke around there. And so I think having to deal with that and be around all of that, I just don't understand why they called him that, made him sit for 1 hour. If someone has bad news, just be sensitive about it. So that part was the most difficult part for me, and I should have probably written a bit more. But I totally agree. Maybe that would have helped me address the second part of
Do
my
you know where he was sitting if he was out of the sight of the officers?
So what do you mean?
Because he out of the sight. Were the officers in a room and he was sitting outside waiting?
Oh no. So the waiting area is actually very central, so that everyone can see you, and you can pretty much see everyone.
So where he went to meet the lieutenant,
Yes.
it was a big open space where he was sitting. They could all see him.
They could all see him. You could all see him. Yeah. Then the lieutenant's office is at the back, but there's a window that allows them to see you. So you have your back to them, but they can see you.
I see. So it's possible that the officers, although they could have asked why you're here, it's like I didn't call this guy down.
Oh, they have a desk there. They have a desk officer at their operations. They will check you in and tell you to sit there. They won't even sit there until they check you in. So once you're sitting there, everybody knows you're supposed to be there. And it just, the ceremonial neglect. Everyone just they see you and they don't see you.
You were up, son.
Go ahead.
No, you were.
God willing, I'll be doing a didactic on communication and listening, and I would love to use your actual back and forth as examples of what I'm going to be, because as you were talking about it, we were like, yeah, this is what he's doing here. He doesn't know it, but he's doing it. But as you all know, I'm theologically dimension challenged, and I'm reading your theological dimension. And you asked basically two questions, and it's probably me, but I see nothing theological about what you said. Am I missing something? You say the main theological dimension for me centered on the question. One is abuse of power, and then the next one you say an obvious challenge is the question of how chaplains can help draw attention to and be helpful in the concrete actions. So, am I missing what the theological dimension is, or I don't understand the connection between these questions and theology?
But I think what I was thinking about, and I could be wrong, feel free to chime in. When I think about the theological dimension, I'm thinking about how we bring in theological principles in our analysis of the verbatim or the session that we had. And so two questions that pop up are the question of justice, which is a major theological principle, and also the question of compassion and upholding the humanity of everyone, regardless of their faith. And so those were the things I was trying to hint at when I mentioned that part. So I could have been more explicit, I guess.
Yeah, the language. So the language of justice and compassion probably more resonate more with theological reflection.
Yeah, and as the chaplain, we have the unique obligation to call for bring this to the attention of the administration administration, as hard as that might be. And that's, where the ethical voice,
But is that theological?
I think so.
My
But, I mean, you could always say everything's love your neighbor like yourself, but yeah, who else is going to do that other than the chaplain? And if that's the case, then that's theological.
Practical than theological.
I don't make the assumption that I'm the only one that can do something, so I guess maybe that's a little bit different. I don't think because I'm a chaplain, I'm the only one can do it. Even justice piece, I'm not the only one.
I didn't say you can. I said that in.
No, that's what you said.
No, no.
Who else can do that?
Oh, okay. Then I misspoke. Who else does that?
I guess maybe we could say that it's more natural for you to expect chaplains to step into that role as opposed to counselors or mental health practitioners.
It's more natural for which people to
For
expect.
chaplains.
For which you say it's more natural for people to expect of which people.
Talking about the DOC in general, because
Do you think the DOC think that's what we're going to do?
that's one of the reasons. It's the problem. That's the confusion because they recognize us as chaplains that we preach love thy neighbor as thyself, but they also call us inmate lovers. So there's this. I don't want to use the word schizophrenia because it's an affront to people who actually suffer from schizophrenia, but they appear to be schizophrenic about it because on the one hand they recognize that that's why we're there, but on the other hand we hate it for being in that role. So this is part of the major dilemma in the DOC with regards to how they view chaplains.
That's a great sociological issue. The sociology of prison. And I think a lot of this is more sociological than anything, and I think that's where you come from. That's kind of one of your primary lenses to see the world, whether it's what you study or whatever. And this is a good example to use for anybody doing level 2. Know yourself. So Usman, I see the world through the sociological lens. So write that one first, because that's grounding. That's where you start, and then jump around to build a picture, an analysis of everything that happened. So out of another parentheses, another caveat to what you just said about schizophrenia. There's a misconception culturally that schizophrenia equals dual personality. It has nothing to do with dual personality. There's a separate diagnosis called bipolar. That's not even it.
Multiple personalities.
Yeah, so multiple personality disorder. When people in our culture say schizophrenia, they often mean multiple personality disorder. It's completely unrelated. Schizophrenia is more hearing voices and voices and often connected to paranoia. So the CIA implanted a thing in my head, and I hear them. They're talking to me. It's all a big conspiracy. I can't trust you even as I tell you this. You're the enemy. If you try to dissuade me, I will lash out at you. That's schizophrenia. Sometimes it doesn't have the paranoid piece. So close that bracket. Back to these verbatims. You're building, and you don't have to think linearly. So start wherever. Or if this guy's emotional, psychological reality just jumped out at you, write that one first, and then build it. I think you got sucked into that sociology perspective in the theology, like you said. So I would just take this whole thing and put it into, dehumanization gets into psychology, but it's more like, cut this out, put it here. Theology. A better way to go is just how you responded verbally. Justice, number 1. Number 2, compassion. Define those theologically, according to your theology. What does justice mean is that relevant to this case, to you personally, to the inmate personally, and then make it practical. Another thing you said was that sounds more practical than theological, right? It's practical theology. Is kind of the crux of CE. It's bringing them together, and ultimately, it's about your caregiving. So how does that inform your actions, your words, as you continue to reflect and get better?
So you want to see where it stems from theologically in our chaplain formation.
So everything starts with formation because we are formed as spiritual counselors. That's who we are. That's what we bring. Another piece of it was he's Protestant, you're Muslim, and again, it's the resonance between you and him. So part of our jobs as chaplains is to explore their theology, ask them what they think. You're always bringing your own angle, your own lens. You can't say the word justice without thinking Islamically about it, because that's who you are. But as a chaplain, you can ask him, is God just? Given what you just experienced, torture. My mind was going to cruel and unusual punishment. This guy thought somebody died. He was sitting there for an hour. What the hell? They don't care. Whether it was intentional and cruel or unintentional
And cool.
and just damn clueless. And yet this is our reality, right? None of us is surprised. So what does that mean to him? Where was God? That kind of question. And the culture, that's great. It's his culture, Hispanic, poor, Britain, child of addicts, mental illness, and then yours, your culture. You come from a totally different culture. How did that help or hinder? How did that just show up? How did you work with that? How did you bridge that with the Avengers?
Oh, I forgot to mention, he's a huge Avengers fan.
And SmackDown.
So that's why I snuck that in there. Right? And even like I say, roll up on someone. So when I use that language, it helps connect with them whenever I use some of the slang that they use.
Yeah. So explore that. Explore why you do it, how you do it, what's good about it, if it ever falls flat.
You want to say
Yes, I want to say something. Everybody I talked to. Hindsight is 20/20 with this stuff. I look at my own stuff and go, oh gosh, I missed a whole bunch of stuff. So you do great work. Love the way you write. Love the way you think. Some of my questions for you. Maybe I'll list all of them. One I wrote for under known facts, you said that you're pretty frustrated with him, right, about his lateness, and then at the end, you tell him what a great, excellent worker he is. Those seem disconnected to me. And I know you wanted to make him feel good. So, which one is true? I was wondering. And it's possible that you could be frustrated, but so that was one thing. Did you know what happened in the? Yeah, he said his mother was drunk. Was their assessment, and he thought he said his mother was just having an episode. I love your analogy about focusing about what has happened versus what is wrong, and there's a tension for me with that. in that sometimes it feels like just focusing on what has happened sometimes have us not hold people accountable. Because, we blame their upbringing and their environment and make them victims of all of that. And there's no, I struggle with the balance of, to do that and to say, okay, I was preaching yesterday to the guys and I was like, it might not have been your fault, but it's now your responsibility. Right? How do we kind of hold that tension? Love the way you held his hand. At first, I wasn't sure what that meant, how you were holding his hand, but I get it. You're trying to comfort him, and it worked, right? And I also like the fact that you offered your chair, the better chair. So I forgot who I was reading. It might have been Dan Siegel. Is it there? It talks about we can affect, our spaces can be trauma informed. So the way a counselor sets up their, or chaplain sets up his or her office actually helps somebody to be more relaxed or more anxious. And so to offer the chair, to give a sense of power, a sense of you're valued, does kind of build a relationship. It kind of lowers their resistance and their awareness. It was genius. I don't do that, so I don't offer my chair. They have a chair similar to mine that they set up, so maybe that's why I don't offer my chair. And if they didn't, I probably wouldn't offer my chair. So thank you for modeling that for me. Yeah, I'm with Shahul about the a couple of times, he mentioned several times about not being, not existent, right? I-17, it says, going crazy, these cops are just joking around, treating me like I don't exist. And he brought up not existent again. I forgot what line it was. And it's hard in the moment to kind of know, okay, what do I do with that? But I loved your thing, to ask, wow, it seemed like that was pretty profound to you. And even to dig into the kind of injustice of others. Have you ever felt like that before? Because I think there's something there, but we're not psychologists. I'm trying to do that. Then it says, talk about his mother's been isolated and how his sister not being on her meds. I mean, that's another spot to be like, wow, what's happening there? What's happening there for you? How does your faith inform you with that? How do you deal with that here? How's your sister doing there? That, the stress of kind of caring for your mom. My sister is fed up, he said. What does that really mean? She's fed up. And have given up hope of ever having a relationship with his father. I mean, there's too many things to chase, but I think one time you mentioned for these level 2s, so you could write down all of the possibilities. That's another, I don't think you could reasonably go after all these. There's a lot there. That might be another place, so what's there? What do you mean? You've given up. How? Why? Does he have kids?
What you just said is really helpful for the care plan opportunities for the future. Jotting it all down. Obviously, you can't cover it all. And when in doubt, really it's not, you need to follow the other person. It's all about following where they want to go. Because at the end of the day, they're the expert. You've got all these tools, you've got a tool belt of ways you can, all these lenses. but don't get sucked into the impression that you're the fixer. And I thought you did a good job of following the emotion, which is the way of giving the power to them to define what it is and define what it means. But yeah, this anybody doing the care plan, and this is in level 1 as well. List all the topics. You know, it's great that you plan to have a formal session with him because you work through it. You've got an opportunity with him that you have very few inmates, right? Because you're going to see him on a daily basis. So, particularly for this inmate, make that list. Keep it in the back of your mind. Always follow him when he comes in, but always be curious and open. Hey, what about? How's your mom doing? Did you ever get in touch with her? What's your relationship with your sister like? Da da da. So that you can draw on those pieces. Keep it moving in a way that he needs.
Do you have questions? You have 3 questions that you asked. So the first question.
Hold on, don't answer. I have
I thought you were
3
done.
more comments. And, C11, you said that I can also sense guilt in your voice. And I'm wondering if it would be better to ask the question, is that guilt I'm sensing in your voice? That's hindsight 2020. And I12, this was profound, I12 and I13, and C13 for me. Said, I don't want to be like him, right? His father, that's why I never touched drugs. I sold drugs to make money. This kind of disassociation that he's not like his father because he didn't use drugs. But he is doing the very thing that he hates that his mother is experiencing. Right? So, I saw what it did to my mother, but it didn't matter that he was doing it to other people to make money. And then you said in C13, I can rationally process that. I think that was a good decision. I was like, oh, I was confused by that. And I think you're trying to say you can see the fact that, hey, you didn't want to get drugs because you saw the mother. But I struggled with the good decision part of all of that.
Of not using.
Of not using, that's what I meant.
I know, but
I know, but overall.
yes.
Are you asking him to make a judgment? I want him about that. You are having a difficult time with the fact that he seems to be impervious to the effect of his drug sales, and yet he sees the destructive role that drugs have in people that are close to him.
Gotcha.
Are you suggesting that he, as the chaplain, should have reprimanded him at
No,
that point in time?
no, to raise that tension. To say, to bring it up to him, say, oh, that's interesting. On one hand, you say this, how destructive it's been to your mother, but you sell it to other people. Have you ever thought about that?
At that point in time?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's what I was thinking. Because he's clearly not in touch with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
From many of the inmates that I have had close contacts with over a long period of time, and they're all in because of drugs, either because he killed somebody over territory or whatever. They all indicated something that's difficult for me to process because I'm not in that environment, and that is there was nothing else. You say like, why sell drugs? There was nothing else. There was absolutely nothing else to do. There were no businesses in the area. There was no groceries in the area. There were no factories in the area. We did not finish school. We did not have a father to push us. Our mother worked 3 jobs. She wasn't around. The only thing I could do to make money was to sell drugs, and therefore be a member of the gang. So I've heard that way too many times. So perhaps this guy, that was the only thing he could do.
Right. I can't accept that. I can't accept that is there was in that absolute term that there was nothing else, that there was no grocery store. Maybe you couldn't walk to it, but you could take a bus somewhere to a grocery store. And I'm not suggesting that all of that is easy, but to tell me there was nothing else, that was the only option, that's not true.
But the easiest option.
I want to pause, and it's a question, not a statement, but it seems like, Michael, your life experience is the most, certainly nothing like my life experience. Your life experience is the closest to what he's describing. You've lived in that neighborhood as a child. For you, it was a real choice. For me, it wasn't a choice. I can't relate.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I don't think any of us can as much as you. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I grew up in high school. I lived in projects where many of these, I see a lot of kids that I grew up with coming to jail. Just saw one yesterday. He was older than I was, and so while even my life was even not the same as theirs, right? Because I have a mother that wasn't on drugs. My mother was a hardworking woman. She didn't have much. She didn't have a high school education, but she was on her grind, working hard. So that makes a difference in terms of just the level of dysfunction. Right? The level of dysfunction in my home was nowhere the level of dysfunction or a sense of abandonment there. That's what these guys had in homes. My dad wasn't there, right? So my mom raised us on her own. But and I could have seen easily where I could have fallen on either side, right? Go this way or go that way. I did track. I was determined to go to college and get an education. That was it. Some of these guys don't have that in them. It's not. My mother pushed that. She's like, you guys need to get education. So that's part of the background. Part of it is in terms of cultural. It was Caribbean. Caribbean ethos is you need education. You got to get education. So I brought that with me when I came into the country. That also makes a difference because Black American doesn't have that same experience. They don't have that same push. Black Americans' relationship to the culture with racism was different from mine as an immigrant black, right? That saw black doctors and black lawyers and had the sense that anything was possible. Some of these guys, 400 years of slavery didn't make it, that's not real to them, right? Everything they've seen has said that that's not possible.
So the next question is, how does your experience help or hinder your role as chaplain, and how do our experiences help or hinder our presence with this guy?
No, for me to say there's no other option has a defeatist kind of is a completely check out. And I don't think unless you have no arms and legs, is it a challenge to have access to the option? Do you lack access to the option? All of that is true, but to say there's no option is a completely different thing for me. So the options are there. It might be difficult, challenging, harder for other people, hard for you, but to tell me that that was the only way and there was no other option, I will buy that.
I fully accept and buy what you just said. That is that the can-do attitude can get you out of any situation. But the minute I accepted that, it created a huge problem for me, which is, and I don't know how to say this without sounding wrong, so please understand it the right way. If that is the case, then the projects, the African-American, Black African-American community has a built-in deficiency of not wanting to do better, not looking for the options. If what I said earlier was they had no other choice, you talked me out of that. You said there is always a choice. But now that's presenting a problem for me, that is, the reason there are so many of them in prison, the reason there are so many of them in gangs, the reason why there are so many of them are involved in violent crime is because they don't have what it takes in them to try harder. And that presents a problem.
Yeah, so there's one thing to have awareness that you have option and to believe you have no option. And I think that many African Americans believe because the system has taught them you have no option, right? So they believe that. So, and your belief, your perception is reality. So you think you have no option. And so, and the other thing that I said that might help to give some nuance to that is that I came with a different cultural experience.
That was clear.
So that makes a difference in the ghettos and in the projects of America, where the long history of racism, and Jim Crowism, and all of the isms matters, right? And where I was, and probably what might have helped me too, I had an accent, and white America didn't consider me black as a black American. You know, oh, you're different than those black Americans, is what they would say. And but they don't appreciate the full impact of racism over this long period of time on a community. And not only because it has an end, right? It's such a part of the fabric of America. It's still operated probably even more efficiently than they did then. And so black culture or black communities are trapped, right, in these, and so this is part of the issue. Black child goes to school, he's like 30 times more likely to get expelled, to go to detention, all this other kind of stuff, right? We know the stats on this reading. That doesn't happen in white communities, right? For a host of reasons. But they have the better schools, they have the better teachers, they have the parents that have jobs and supportive and yada yada. Those have the same kind of strength. All those, and then they pour all of those people, all those kids in quote unquote the project. They house them, all the poor people together, and send them all to the same school, under-resource them, and underfund them, and then kick them out or punish them for trauma, for the trauma they're experiencing, for acting up, for being hungry, for whatever it is. Expel them, they're in jail, then the kids feel like, you know, school is useless to me because I can't read, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not getting any help. So they skip, they leave, they go hustle, they, you know, and the whole, not everybody, but a whole lot of folks that are pooled together are having that same struggle. So what the tension of what you bring is real, that there are choices that ain't necessarily easy. It wasn't easy for me. In some ways maybe a little easier because of my own wiring build up. But you know, in some ways I have a slight advantage, I would say, than the typical African American who has kind of come from the line of just been drowned in oppression in all kinds of ways. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and it showed, I mean, that also shows how connected all these categories are. The culture leads to the sociological, leads to the emotional impact, the psychology, and it's all, theology covers everything. You know, what is this, where is God? What's this mean? How do we interpret and work with and make practical interventions? What difference do we make? Huge.
Yes, I'm sorry you wanted to answer some questions.
Yes, he asked 3 questions.
Yes.
The first question was the disconnect in the beginning about him missing work and my compliment in the end. And that's in fact true. He's a good worker when it comes to work. He does his work really, really well. His problem is consistency. And so, again, it ties into your second question, but not dealing with the accountability piece. in the sense that the mistake that I made from question one, so the disconnect in this case is that it is true, he missed work and he was sick. The illness part was more mental illness that had, psychosomatic symptoms where it affected him physically. And so in this case, one doesn't negate the other. I actually I prefer the other one. I have a preference for the positive part because I've learned to reinforce the positive over the negative to ensure that there is consistency because you can fix that problem. If it's a bad worker and it's consistent, I'd rather have a good worker who's inconsistent because I believe I can deal with the consistency piece if I work well with him. So it goes back to question 2 about how do you reconcile the mindset from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. And it's a very useful tension to have. But I don't see a disconnect necessarily in terms of accountability. I think that piece is always there, but accountability it's not at the forefront right away. It takes time to get to accountability. There's a powerful YouTube clip about how trauma affects the brain, and it's a bit simplistic, but it's very, very useful. And I've tried it in some of my programs. And he talks about the learning brain versus the survival brain, and how the survival brain, some would call it reptilian brain, when it is activated for a long period of time, tends to supersede the learning brain, especially when you're in a high stress environment that makes it very, very difficult for you to calm down, begin to switch back into learning brain. And so when you ask the question, what is wrong, what happened to you, you're meeting them at the level of survival brain. And hopefully by using the right methods and interventions, you're able to create an environment which is very unlikely in prison, I think. But at least there is an effort to sort of make people aware of what's going on before you can now start talking about accountability. Because accountability functions primarily in the realm of the learning brain. It's a skill you need to learn, being conscious about what's going on. So I don't know if that addresses your question.
Yeah, my question wasn't that you didn't do it. My question was my own sense of creating a balance of exactly what you're saying. When do I make them accountable? And I love the point you're making about the reptilian brain because that speaks to Sammy's, like why these African Americans can't pull up their socks and get out of this struggle is because, to your point, their reptilian brain has been trained for generations to survive, right? And that there is no help. So they kind of get stuck there. Anyways, slideshow. So I wasn't questioning that you didn't do it. I was raising the question to myself and appreciate your input about how to make that decision. Because you're right, you have to meet them where they are, which is safety and security, the reptilian, right? That's what's running things. And try to re-engage prefrontal cortex. What do you call it? The thinking brain is what you call it?
Yeah, the learning or thinking brain. Yeah.
And because it's been disconnected, it's disassociation, and we're just stuck in survival. So that's why we can sell drugs and not have any compassion or connection between the harm we're causing to others, even though my own mother's dying from drugs. Because safety, the survival brain just says, I need money to survive.
I'm finding this to be incredibly helpful, this whole discussion. It really is.
Okay, there's a book that the school I coach, every year we have a summer reading list. And this year, actually, they having Brené Brown over at some point during the school year at Louis Chase. She's coming to a convocation. They have $200 million in endowment. So they have and there's this book we're doing, the all school read is called White Fragility. And I'm just, you've Robin DiAngelo?
I haven't read it, but
Oh my goodness, it shifted my perspective on racism and how, whether we like it or not, we're all complicit in it in one form or another. And part of the problem is we think about racism from an individual standpoint, without properly acknowledging the massive role systemic dimension plays in all of it. It's a wonder. I've only read 2 chapters. My wife and I are sharing the book, and so I steal it whenever she reading it. But it's so dense, it's so rich, it's challenging me in ways that I never. It's a book we should probably consider reading at some point. Her name is Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. It's powerful. It's powerful.
Robin.
Robin DeAngelo.
Can you send us that video? Tell us what it's called. About types of the brain.
Oh yeah.
If you suppose.
If you type Jacob Ham, he was the one, the same guy.
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy. He did that video on how trauma in the brain by Jacob Ham.
The Paulo Vega book that I read talks in detail about what you're saying, down to the granular level, really profound. This
Yeah.
Paulo Vega theory.
It's all connected.
Yeah, about the, what you call the reptilian brain, or what they call the dorsal-vagal nervous system, which is the oldest part of our evolution, part of our brain, designed for safety. And when that's trained,
Thank you.
that's what runs things, right? So,
Who's next?
You can go first.
He doesn't have
okay,
to.
sure, I can go. So, sit up tall, feet on the ground.
I think he made it verbatim.
Okay.
No, he doesn't. He's ahead of everyone.
All right.
He's messing with you.
I got you.
Oh, my
There's
goodness.
some,
I have two, but I chose this one because we have a Nigerian here, and I need you to
And
help me with this one.
I don't think you wrote this, because it's only 2 pages.
You're missing
It's
a page.
missing pages, bro. It's 135.
You only printed odd number pages.
and how does everybody feel about it?
Distressed.
Great. Yeah, great.
Distressed.
Um,
I think my brother is not feeling well.
No.
I don't know why that happened. Could I just read it with my phone?
Yeah.
No, because we won't have it. How are we going to
Yeah, I'm gonna
participate?
do the verbatim.
Oh, we all do from our phone.
Yeah, I sent it to everybody. Is it okay?
Man,
Do we have a choice?
Can't you just go print it?
I can go print it, but
Go print it.
so I have 2 verbatims ready, but since Usman is here, and it involves Nigerian trauma.
Scam artists. Oh, no.
Trauma in Nigeria.
No, really?
I might have to stop class and have an emergency covenant group. There's just so much happening.
That's right.
All right. So the name that this inmate has is Raphael, and Raphael is a DOC employee. He's a teacher. He's married. He's about 52 years old. He's black Nigerian. This is the 6th of 8.
Can you give me a minute to find?
Oh, sure.
Is this on the Wajinka?
No, that's the one that I'm not presenting.
Oh, okay.
That's the one I have.
Okay, so you should also have Raphael. And
Raphael came before the other one.
you got it?
I got it now.
Sorry,
Pretty good.
downloaded.
Downloaded. Is this an iPhone? Oh, I don't know if it's an iPhone. It's to change the
I'd say on it.
spin it. Yeah. Who has an iPhone? How do you make it rotate? So it won't rotate automatically. What button?
Okay. If you go up here and pull
Swipe
down, and then you'll find the lock. So it's properly locked. So let me. Okay.
Yep.
You see, it's locked. You see the red one on the side. Now it will do it. Now get rid of that. What? Yeah.
All right, so we're calling him Raphael. He's a teacher in school. It's about 30 minutes. He's about 52 years old. He's a black Nigerian. It's very recent, August 20th. Last week. It's a jail. It's male, and it's taking place in the chaplain's office. There's no referral. He just came by and for a visit. Raphael works as a teacher in the facility. I have known him since the very start of my employment with the DOC. We are very friendly colleagues, always inquiring of each other's good and welfare. In order to understand the issues going on in Nigeria and how they have impacted upon Raphael in recent times, I have included this brief description. I am no expert on the matter, and that's why I need Usman to help me. And I selected what appeared to me, at least, to be, to the best of my knowledge, an impartial description of the issues. It is not intended only to provide the context for Raphael's concerns as it pertains to the it is intended to create the context because it has to do with violence in Nigeria that has upset Raphael so much. So here's the part that I didn't write, and this is the short description. I could read it, or you could look at it real quick. What do you say?
Read it, please.
Okay, just give us a summary.
I don't know if we can summarize any quicker than I can read it.
All right.
In the first half of 2018, more than 1,300 Nigerians have died in violence involving herders and farmers. Where once spontaneous attacks have become premeditated scorched earth campaigns in which marauders have taken villages by surprise at night, now claiming about 6 times more civilian lives than the Boko Haram insurgency. The conflict poses a grave threat to the country's stability and unity. The conflict is fundamentally a land use contest between farmers and herders across the country's Middle Belt, not Middle East. It has taken on dangerous religious and ethnic dimensions, however, because most of the herders are from the traditionally nomadic and Muslim Fulani, who make up about 90% of Nigeria's pastoralists, while most of the farmers are Christians of various ethnicities. The conflict's roots lie in climate-induced degradation of pasture and increasing violence in the country's far north, which have forced herders south, the expansion of farmers and settlements that swallow up grazing reserves and block traditional migration routes, and the damage to farmers' crops wrought by herders, indiscriminate grazing. But 3 immediate factors explain the 2018 escalation. First is the rapid growth of ethnic militias, such as those of the Bakama and Fulani, in Adamawa State, bearing illegally acquired weapons. Second is the failure of the federal government to prosecute perpetrators or heed early warnings of impending attacks. Third is the introduction in the November 2017 of anti-grazing laws vehemently opposed by herders in the Benue and the Taraba states, and the resultant exodus of herders and cattle largely into neighboring Nasarawa and, to a lesser degree, Adamawa, sparking clashes with farmers in those states. Preparation and learning issues? None. Raphael just walked into the chaplain's office. Observations? Christy left. Observations? Raphael didn't just stick his head in the door and say hi this time. He closed the door behind him. He was staying for a while. And now we get into the conversation.
Why isn't downloading?
What?
Is this the one you sent this morning?
Somebody want to try to save paper.
Save internal storage. So it's your internal storage. I don't know where your internal. You'll find it in your documents. Sort it and download it. But we can share if you want. Mine is quite big. Alright.
Since you are you want to be
Yeah.
okay?
Hello, Rabbi.
That was rather.
Wow. Do I have a choice?
Hello, Rabbi. How are you, my friend?
Fine, so nice to see you, Raphael. It's been a while. How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
And how is your family in Nigeria?
It's very rough.
What's going on?
Muslim Fulani forces are killing my Igbo people in the east. They come in with their cattle and eat up all our pastoral lands on our farms. They have come in and kidnapped many young schoolgirls, and we have not seen them since. They rape them, girls in front of their parents, and kill them. It's very bad, Rabbi.
Muslim chaplain was also present in the room, and he listened the entire time with great compassion, and for once defending the Nigerian Muslims.
Oh, this does sound very bad, Raphael. I'm so sorry this is going on.
I'm very worried about them, Rabbi.
Yes, the new
Oh, sorry. Yes, the new President Muhammad Buhari is determined to impose Sharia law throughout every region of Nigeria. That's his dream.
What does this mean for your family there?
I'm very worried about them, Rabbi. Most of the violence is in the border region. Fortunately, my family are inland more, but I fear that the attacks and killings will spread.
What a horrible, helpless feeling you must have right now.
Yes, and it's not just a feeling, Rabbi. There has been horrific bloodshed.
I feel your deep concern, Raphael. I wish I could help. The truth is, I feel helpless.
It helps me, Rabbi, to come in here and tell you and see what is troubling you.
Nasif powerfully present the entire time.
We're glad you feel comfortable coming to speak with us.
Nasif says yes.
Yes, you're both my chaplains too.
Raphael explains to Nasif, looking in his direction.
You know, we're like the Jews of Nigeria, very educated and industrious. We come from ancient Israel. We wanted to form our own Igbo nation called Biafra, but they won't allow us because most of the oil is in our lands, and we bring jobs and business to the entire country. We are punished for our excellence.
Background of Biafra, a state that was proclaimed in 1967. When I was 7 years old, when part of southeastern Nigeria, inhabited chiefly by the Igbo people, sought independence from the rest of the country. In the ensuing civil war, the state's troops were overwhelmed by numerically superior forces, and by 1970, it had ceased to exist. The inside story not known in the West is that it was an Israelite or Hebrew nation seeking to establish independence.
I know your Igbo people, Raphael, and their ties to ancient Israel. Let me read one thing to you real quick.
I quickly pulled up from email a description of the Israelite origins of the Igbo people and read it out loud. Raphael is shaking his head yes the entire time and commenting as each major fact is read. I'd like you to read it because there's names in there that I won't pronounce properly.
I want to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so many African Americans identify as Israelite, not Jewish, but feel a greater kinship towards Judaism and Christianity. Most Igbo Nigerians regard themselves as Israelites, even though most are practicing Christians. They trace their lineage to the tribe of Gad, the seventh son of Jacob. Gad had three sons who settled in southeastern Nigeria. These three sons were Eri, Arodi, and Areli, and are mentioned in Genesis 46:16. Nigerians testify that their Israelite ancestors established clans and kingdoms, whose remnants can be found today in the towns of Owerri, Oguleri, Arochukwu, and Aguleri. So that's exactly right, Rabbi. Bravo. Thank you. Not many people take the time to learn that. Thank you, my friend.
You don't have to thank me. I am always interested in learning more. But now I am worrying for you, for your Igbo people, right along with you. What do you think we should do?
I don't know, Rabbi. It's gotten to be very bad. It is very scary right now.
Can I pray for you and your people?
Yes, Rabbi. Yes, please do, Rabbi.
Almighty God, Master of the universe, I call out to you on behalf of my brother Raphael, who is very distressed and worried about the well-being of his family in Nigeria and his Igbo people there in the East. He feels helpless and imperiled, but you are powerful and you hear the prayers of humanity. Hear us now as our hearts are joined seeking safety and peace in the region. My brother does not see a path towards safety, and it is for this reason we seek your wise counsel and your protection, power at this time. protecting power at this time. There is nothing you cannot do. You can sow peace between Israelites and Israelites,
And
Ishmaelites, between shepherds and farmers, between Muslims and Israelite Christians. We do not know how to solve this conflict and quiet the violence and suffering. Our hearts of flesh are shaken. Where are you, O living God? Where are you, O living God? Where is your mercy? Where is your judgment upon the wicked? The people do not have weapons to protect themselves. So many countries have turned their back on the Igbo people. We call out to you because we know you have the power to help the people of Nigeria, the Igbo people and all the others who are helpless in the region. Hear our prayer. Protect us. Strengthen us. Protect Raphael's family and their loved ones.
Amen. Thank you, my friend. Let's speak again soon.
Anytime, Raphael.
Do any scriptural passages or characters come to you in the context of reviewing the visit? Send your deliverance and save us. But it does remind me of Abraham and Lot and the same exact kind of feud that they had in passing, being shepherds passing through other people's lands, and where Abraham was muzzling the sheep and Lot was not muzzling the sheep. And that was the issue that caused him to go in opposite directions. So there's a lot. Yeah.
Those Muslims.
Well,
I thought they were arguing over that they were getting entangled, like mixed up. Like Lot's workers were arguing with Abraham's
that
workers.
too. But the
There was another
the
dimension.
Mako partition, they destroy the broken. So the rabbinical commentary, the rabbinical commentary is that Lot said, well, the Almighty has promised this land to you, right? So you should be able to unmuzzle your sheep. And then Abraham said, well, that might be true, but it hasn't come to pass yet. So I'm going to respect other people's property, and that was the way they explained it. So critiquing my own responses. So there's going to be a major critique here that has nothing to do with that you read. How did you respond to this patient? I mostly listened and asked open-ended questions and let Raphael speak. Of course, I prayed in there. Any insights about what influenced your responses? He was distressed and spoke with greater emotion than in times past. So I knew something was up. How was your contract with him set? He just walked in the door. What were your strong points and weaknesses? The listening was good. The responses kept the power, agency, and authorship with Raphael. And here's the major thing that I missed. Thinking back, what I wish I didn't do was, when I prayed, I stood up and faced Raphael, which cut Nasif out of the picture. This was insensitive of me, particularly since Nasif is Muslim. And Raphael was speaking about death and destruction in Nigeria by the hand of Muslims. I cut Nasif out of prayer, and I should have formed a circle for the three of us, since Nasif was very much part of this encounter. Even though that he didn't speak, with his powerful spiritual presence. This was a major failure on my part, which I could go to great length to expand upon, but let me leave it at that, since I made a goal being short. Opportunities. I will pay him a visit and not wait for him to come back to me. Most of our visits usually go that way, so I'll go to him this time. I will speak with Nasif and apologize for my body language at the prayer. Ethical power dynamics. No, we are equal co-workers. The ethical issue in Nigeria, though, are plentiful. Were there any ethical issues regarding the persons in question? No. Power dynamic, equal power. I disempowered Nasif, though, as I mentioned. is a strong church person. Raphael is a praying man and turns to prayer as a comforting practice. And Raphael is not currently facing end-of-life issues.
With a spiritual assessment, it's not end of life issues. He's staff, so it's not relevant anyway. But it'll be incarceration issues or rehabilitation issues.
Oh, that's what it is. Written. But okay. It's very hospitalish. So
Yes.
translate things. So what kind of incarceration issues would you say?
Well, I mean, you can always apply it. It's basically applied. How does this apply to the context and the reality of the context? So the reality of the context in a hospital is often end of life. It's not necessarily though. If it was a psych patient, it would be psych care plan. If it's hospice, obviously it's end of life, but it can often be just health. Maintaining, getting to health. And incarceration, it would be like for Rose, how does all the assessment apply to him being,
I'll say.
because he's an inmate, you're supposed to staff person. An inmate, it would be, how does this person move forward in their incarceration productively? A staff person, it's how does this person move forward in his work productively? This is clearly really distressing. How does he come to work? What's going on? How does he teach under stress? How does he teach, for example, an African Muslim in his class who shows up? Has feelings.
You're saying function.
Yeah. How
How does it function?
does X person function in X context?
Can I ask Usman about his point of view of what's going on? How we heard it from the teacher's point of view and from the article that you read.
Christian.
So how do you have a different read on it, Usman? Of what's
I
happening?
thought I was waiting for later on after we take care of because that's more outside of the CP.
Sure.
It's more.
Correct.
I didn't want to make that the major thing, but I wanted you to understand why he.
Yeah.
I don't think you could understand what he said without.
Sure. I'm aware that I have my own prejudice too.
Can you do it in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I guess I could try.
That means no.
We'll set a timer,
Oh, you want to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then we can, because it is kind of, it's what you're asking for. It's
Oh, that's why I
probably-
read that one. I really want to
Yeah.
learn so that when I follow up with him, I have a broader understanding from a human rather than
So here goes nothing. It doesn't start in 1967, which is when we had the Civil War.
Right.
You got to go back to the British. When the British were in Nigeria and they amalgamated the North and the South in 1914, they divided the country into 3 regions.
Wait, can I tape record you this?
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm going to have to write this news. Just because I'm going to listen to it when I drive around and remember it.
So in 1914, the British amalgamated the North and the South
Wait,
and divided the country into 3 regions. The Northern region.
sorry, start again.
Okay. So in 1914, the British amalgamated the North and the South of Nigeria and divided the country into 3 regions. The Northern region, which is the predominant region, the Western region, and the Eastern region, which is very simplistic. But in a country that has over 250 ethnic groups and 400 different languages, that's very problematic in many ways. So in 1960, when they finally left, when they were forced to leave, they saw division between different parts of the country. Now, while all this is going on, remember the point that I made about 250 ethnic groups?
Negroes?
250 ethnic groups.
Ethnic.
Ethnic groups.
Okay.
So if you divide the country into 3 parts, and roughly claim that in the north you have the Hausa, in the west you have the Yoruba, and the east you have the Igbos, that leaves close to more than 240 ethnic groups who are small minority ethnic groups. So
Right.
I am from a minority ethnic group who's stuck in the middle between the north and the west.
Mm.
So we're in no man's land. Now with the Igbos, the area in the east, unfortunately, encompasses the eastern part of the Middle Belt and the southern part of the country. They're loosely called Igbo, but the majority of people in those regions are not Igbo. They belong to what we call the Niger Delta people.
Niger Delta?
So, for example, the Ogonis, Ken Saro-Wiwa, if you recall what happened in 1999 when they had the Ogoni-9 conflict, these small ethnic groups are the ones that actually have the oil, not the Igbos. But the Igbos, because they're the biggest ethnic group in the area, they claim that they have the oil. This is my perspective as someone from the Middle Belt. So, in looking at this perspective, I see a lot of bias. I think it's more complicated than just Muslims in the north fighting the Christians in the east. It is actually done by a lot of the politicians from the north and from his own ethnic group. By causing division, amongst the people in that area, it makes it easy for them to plunder the wealth of the country and steal money without accountability. So a lot of it is actually self-directed, self-induced by political and economic leaders and elites in these regions. So I think this position is a bit simplistic. A good book to look at, which probably testifies to the fact that I'm definitely a product of the colonial experience, is a book called The Five Majors, Why They Struck, by a British writer called David G.M. Moffat. I read it when I was a teenager. My dad had it. And this is very telling. Even to this day, I do not trust any Nigerian author who writes about the Civil War, because I believe that he writes about it from a particular ethnic lens, a particular religious lens. So those of us in the Middle Belt, we see very differently. He's from the east, obviously he's Igbo, he sees it very differently, he sees the victim mentality. And if you have people in the south and the small, actually, Biafra failed, not just because of the overwhelming superiority of the north and the rest of the country. It actually failed because the small ethnic groups in the east felt they didn't want to be under Igbo rule. They would be marginalized by the Igbos. So that people don't often talk about that part. It's very simple to say, oh, the Muslims are fighting the Christians, but it's much, much deeper than that. And that's my 2 cents on this. I hope it was helpful.
That's greatly appreciated. And as a Nigerian, did you, if you don't mind, since I think you did it faster than funny. As a Nigerian, did you,
And he's feeling the
Begging
pain
for
of
more time?
did you think of Igbo people as Israelite, or is that something that didn't come to your awareness?
I was aware of it, but it was more, they identify themselves as Israelites. We were aware of it, but
That they define themselves.
yes. But it was always confusing because the majority of them are Christians.
Oh, they are, yeah. There's not-
Israelites are, well, considered Christians.
But maybe in my mind, I conflicted two Jewish and
That's it.
so.
Well, yeah, Israelite is different than Jewish. Okay, thank you. Do you have any ideas about how the conflict could be resolved?
No.
Just, mention it.
We could talk about that.
Okay.
No, it's very tempting. This is hugely
Okay.
distressing. One, jumping from the sociological, cultural to the context that we work in. Just one thing you said was you don't trust any Nigerian writer.
Would you trust the imperialists that
Which
colonized
I'm
you?
ashamed of saying that, but again, I admitted that part.
But what the parallel is something that Chuck always says when he talks about reentry stuff. Nothing about us without us, right? So obviously, and it goes to your question: how the hell is this going to work out? How can they do anything? They can't even agree on what happened, right? How are they going to? So with us, our system is white fragility, separating the minorities and sticking them in ghettos, and then we look at them. The white people look at them and say, "Fix yourself." It's just it's not.
You talking about saying to the black people, fix yourself?
Right. That's kind of the.
You're gonna talk. I have to go back. Can you just do something with Usman on the Nigerian thing was back in 30 seconds?
We'll just talk about you.
Yeah.
Whatever, talk about it.
I know we tabled the subject, but it's a quick comment because it has similar effects on where I come from. Of all the colonial powers that existed in the previous century, none have been worse in leaving mayhem behind as the English were. And if you think about everywhere the English were and when they left, what they have left behind, and you will see that there are active wars today still from the time they left. Look at Kashmir and India and Pakistan. Look at Palestine and Israel. Look at the Gulf states and Yemen. Okay, all of these were sown. That division, he said, before they leave, they saw division. That was such a powerful tool that the English had to maintain some influence after they left, and they were absolutely the least moral human beings in terms of the French were bad, but not as bad. The Italians were not as bad. The Dutch did the same, but nobody did it at the proficient level as the English did. I mean, look at the Hutus and Tutsies.
So in the sub-Saharan African context, most African intellectuals believe that the Belgians were actually the wars. So look at Belgian Congo and all the problems they created also in Rwanda before they left. So the Belgians were seen as being, even though they had a smaller share, they were seen as the British part because of quantity.
Yes.
They had a more expansive empire, and so you see the conflicts in various parts. But in terms of intensity, the Belgians were seen as being the worst colonial powers in the history of African colonization.
So just comments.
I'm actually ashamed of that part because
What part?
of Africa's colonial history. I'm afraid to actually go into it.
Really?
I don't know why, it scares me. I did quite a bit in college.
The truth scares you.
I know why.
Why?
Because like in his case and in my case, our people,
Benefited.
some of our people were implicit in what the English did. The English found a way to recruit locals to do their bidding. And we were guilty. Some of our people were guilty of that. Not me personally, not my father, but my countrymen were definitely guilty.
It's actually a shame because in the 60s, it was a very vibrant post-colonial intellectual environment. We had people like Frantz Fanon.
Mm-hmm.
They really analyzed it. They were spread out all over the place. They looked at French Algeria, for example. They looked at many parts of Africa. It's a shame that my generation, we've lost touch with that generation, both intellectually and culturally.
So how can we help you?
Well, you already helped me a lot. I wanted to, I learned early on in my career, from domestic disputes that come to me, in the community as a rabbi, that you have to always see both sides. And that's a great example to it, originally, one that one side of the spread. And so that's the other verbatim probably had more CPE-ish and having issues of power as chaplains in the DOC. But being that Usman's here has a lot of knowledge, I decided to go with this one. And so you already helped me by hearing about some of the intricacies of smaller ethnic groups, and it rings true, and it broadens my understanding, so when I follow up with him, not that I'm going to contest his version, that's not what I'm there to do. But it, at least on the inside of me, I kind of understand it a little bit better.
You mentioned, well, I think we all do. You hear a gut-wrenching story, you join, right? So how did that show up here in that conversation? And how, looking back, what's the learning? What could you have done differently here?
I think I zeroed in on his helplessness, because I felt helpless too.
That was great that you said. I feel helpless.
But because I do feel helpless, I can't help. You know, in any kind of material way. So all I can do is be a spiritual presence and help him unload this. I can see how that it could be a critical point, like why I read about the history of his people. But I thought about that already, and I thought that it was the right choice because it gave him comfort to know that I understood him and I understood his history. And I thought it was important enough to study it.
What you drew on, did you, I forget how you put it, did you find this information in the moment, or did you already kind of know it?
It was already in my doctoral report. It was, had to do with that. That's what I was able to find.
Yeah.
Had to do with African American Israelites.
You made a comment in there that most African American consider themselves Israelite.
Oh, did I say most? What?
Many African Americans identify as Israelite, not Jewish.
Yeah, in my group. Many Jews.
And the ones who register as Jewish.
Yeah. And they don't identify with.
I didn't get that there. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
I didn't get it either.
In America, many African Americans, which I
Oh, okay, yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, no, so that probably wasn't written fully or not clearly enough. And I'll rewrite it, but what this meant is just people that come to my group, a lot of them say they're Israelite and they view don't take it as an insult, but they view the Christian more aligned with the colonialism, and Israelite not that.
Christianity is a white man's religion.
Yeah, there's that. It's a conquering.
It's funny because when I wear my American hat, that's how I see it. When I wear my Arab hat, I see Christianity as an Arab thing. Because,
What do you wear when you wear a Trump hat? When you see that?
when I wear my Trump hat, I am so stupid, I can't even think straight.
You're reptilian brain.
Frozen.
So drawing on your previous study helped you connect, helped him feel understood.
Yeah.
How might it have been a hindrance?
If I was having an ego trip about it, you know, like, look what I know. No, I wasn't. It was, I already had my ego trip. This was not wasn't necessarily. It was consciously thinking, you know, that here's a man that has a perspective that very few people understand. How comforting it would be to him if I was able to, you know, quote chapter and verse of his in a word.
You came to me with a safe plea.
So I didn't hear.
Same staff.
Can I ask a question about, Nasif was there all the time. listening and agreeing with some of what's been said sometimes. Two things. One, have you spoken to him since then about that topic?
No.
Have you considered how he was feeling during this
Right.
stage?
That was
What
like
did,
have I considered it since big time as I wrote?
well, that's about the prayer part, but about how he, as a Muslim, was.
Well, I think that he was probably very offended on it. But
Very offended you?
offended by not being included. That like he's in analyzing myself, I have a lot of really sharp criticism of myself, which is I don't know, to be very honest, it's very vulnerable. It was like a subgroup that was between me and him, as those are the Jews of Nigeria. That's his words, right? So we're bros over here, and Nasif is not. And that
They're
came
both
out,
under attack from these Muslims.
and it came out by what am I back to? There was that. So if you want to, you're saying, you're asking me the question if you want to know the real because that's it right there.
Very beef of this verbatim.
Where my failure was, like, if you want to say, like, was it in my ego? No, that's not where it is. Where it is right what I'm saying. That in my inner self, I got very absorbed into this connection. Like he was coming to see me, but Nasif had turned his attention and had been very powerfully present with his eyes and a lot of therapeutic runs and stuff. And he was part of it. I excluded him. And that was one thought. Another thread to my exclusion was not only that, but it was also that I'm unclear if Muslims, and this is where you help me, ever join in a prayer circle, which is a very Christian-like thing, although we've done that before here, but sometimes I'm a little unclear as the law, maybe Sharia or something, or a custom about joining in with other faiths in a collective
Talk about Nasib, the most eclectic communal Muslim that you ever met, that has a thing every year, invite people of all faith to come, a rabbi to play music, a Christian to pray at a Jewish function. That Nasib.
That same Nasib whom we never join in a circle like that, even in those interfaith things.
I prayed. Well, have you prayed for all Muslims?
I'm talking about in that formation of going around with a spontaneous prayer. And that's what I need help with. If there's something that
May I answer?
in Islam that says don't do that.
Real briefly, 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. In Islam, we have broken things into life into two things. We have broken it into worship and everything else.
Right.
And the law for worship is that all worship in Islam is forbidden except what has been explicitly permitted. So we pray 5 times a day, not 6, not 4. We pray them at those specific times, not before, not after, and so forth. For us, the word innovation in worship is a dirty word, but it is a beautiful word in Christianity. So that's why Muslims, if you go to his little mosque in his little village, and my little mosque in my little village, you'll find people praying exactly the same way, because we do not innovate. In everything else, the law is that everything is permissible except what has been specifically forbidden. So we don't drink alcohol because there's a text that says don't drink alcohol. We don't eat the swine because there's a text that says don't eat the swine. So that's the basic thing. So for us, where we come from, holding hand in a circle to us is an innovation. So we would have avoided it like the plague. Having said that,
How is that innovation? Because it's prayer?
because it's a form of prayer, it's a form of worship.
But
Even the way we
In
call
Islam, a circle holding hands is a form of prayer? Is a form of worship?
no, it's not, because we don't have it. We only pray one way, and to us, prayer has a meaning. and it's a very specific meaning. It has its rituals, it has its times, it has its prerequisites, blah, 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 blah. When we make a supplication, which is what you're calling a prayer here, even supplications have the rules. We start them in a particular way, we go through certain steps, we praise God before we ask Him for anything, we thank Him before we ask. So we have those things. Okay. So for us who come here, we find this around us, and we are in a dilemma. And
Yes.
the dilemma is,
You keep saying us.
and that's why I asked
this
his permission to speak on both of our behalves.
I'm gonna have 1 minute to
Response.
extrapolate whatever sentence.
So,
You have 30 more seconds.
so we find ourselves in a difficult position. Do we actually become very stickler to the rules that says I am performing some sort of a prayer and I'm not allowed to deviate from what I'm normally doing, versus this is the common way the interfaith community works in this part of the world, and if I do not join in, I am doing something really bad in the way of interfaith.
But it wouldn't be prayer to Islam, I'm sorry.
So my last 5 seconds will say, I do it, and I do it reluctantly. I'm not comfortable when I'm doing it, especially when our Christian brothers end that prayer in the name of Jesus Christ rather than in the name of the Lord. So,
I agree with most of what he said about the prayer, but I make two distinctions. The first distinction is there's the ritual prayer, which he highlighted with the 5 daily prayers. That's ritual prayer, and there's no room for compromise. It's very rigid. There's fixed times in a certain way. My masjid in Nigeria will do the same thing if I walk into his masjid in Palestine. Same thing. Then there's the non-ritual prayer, just general supplication. You don't have to be in the ritual state of purity to do that. With that, I think it varies for different Muslims. And you got to keep in mind that I grew up I was heavily influenced by Christianity when I was growing up. So I am comfortable for the most part in those gatherings.
Okay.
Except like you highlighted, if the prayer, now that I'm older, it gets a bit tricky when the person, like when we're at the retreat, when Rosado prayed and he was very Jesus heavy in the prayer, that part, it shook me up a bit. But I'm comfortable in that area. But what I just do in my head is that I substitute in the name of Jesus with the name of God. I make accommodations. So I'm more comfortable. I think I am in that sense, but I see where it's coming from. But I make a primary distinction between ritual prayer and non-ritual prayer. So in your case, I will be non-ritual prayer, and I think that I will suspect that Nasif will be even more comfortable in that gathering than I am. So
5 seconds. So I think that I was right in not, saying, come, let's gather around. But I think I was wrong in putting my back towards Nasif. He could have.
No, you could have invited him. Let him say no.
Well,
I'm not comfortable.
I don't want to put him on.
All right. So may we drill down into what was happening in the room, what you were experiencing, what caused you to do what you did, good or bad, and then what you can learn if something like this happens again.
Well, I would that not be explicit in my exclusion in my body language, but I would be more kind of in a middle position to allow that person to either take more Usman round of discretion, which is a little wider with Usman, or take the position of Samuel, which the discretion is almost not there.
Yeah.
In that regard.
I forget, without the page 2, you don't, I didn't realize Nasif was there until he said yes.
No, he mentioned him very early on.
He should have
He
been
said
a
the Muslim chaplain was present very, very early. He didn't name him, but he said
Right, he didn't
presence.
name
I
him.
named that later.
You didn't name him.
Right.
So just pause. Even in your write-up, you were dismissive of Nasif.
But right, I began to learn as I was writing.
Yes.
When I came to the reflection part.
Yeah.
But I had already written that, and I didn't remember to.
Right.
Well, actually, it's good that I wrote it the way that I wrote it, because I did. That was a lack of awareness, and that write-up reflected it.
Yeah.
Only in the write-up, so it's good that I didn't say it, because that was the problem in this.
Well, it's not good that you didn't say it, but it reflected where
It
you were.
reflected what the reality of the situation.
Yeah, this is a perfect example that there are so many levels of action, reflection, action, reflection, action, and it's so easy. Hindsight is 2020. It's so easy to go back, even on your best visits. If you think about it hard enough,
We'll find something.
you're going to find something, right? Nobody's perfect, and the goal is not perfection. The goal is not to have it all airtight. The goal is to move along.
Right.
So, what is it about Nasif? What is it about you? What is it about the room? What is it about this guy's story? What was the main contributing factor that made Nasif invisible to you?
Can I have a screwdriver?
No.
And you what?
No, no,
Assist for everything?
no, I
Rescue.
want you to try this. Say the last part of the question. What was like? What was going through my head, sort of thing.
What contributed to Nasif being invisible to you?
First, he did come to see me. That's true. And he said hello to both of us. But I was aware that Nasib was paying attention. I was worried that he'd be offended by the way that Raphael was characterizing the conflict as an Islamic problem, and Nasib is a Muslim. So there was a discomfort there, and I was sort of admiring. Nasib is a spiritual Chinese, and he's not being reactive at all to him. He's just being there for his humanity. So why the heck would I make him invisible? I think it was just that overarching subgroup thing that we rose because he's the Jew of Nigeria. He's so excited. He's my boy.
Use the phrase, you got absorbed in connection.
Yeah, I think got absorbed with
It's powerful.
and the identity that
Two minorities under persecution. So,
yeah, maybe it was a little hostility came out to Nasib being. Maybe that's a little bit that lives in me.
Passive aggressive.
Maybe a little bit of that. That narrative, like I don't even want to say it. But
Say it.
the Muslims.
Just saying.
Damn Muslims, spreading their Sharia all over the bloody place. Even though that Nasib is so light years away from that, but a little bit of the last Horcrux lives within me, or not literally that. Harry Potter.
I have a minute to talk about Sharia.
No. This is powerful. We all hold feelings, grudges, anger, pain. It's not a question of if it shows up in your character. It's a question of when and why. And if it weren't for CPE, you would not have noticed unless he was invisible to you in that moment. You would have gone on your merry way, as we all do,
Unconscious.
unconscious, right? And there are these seeds of trauma in all of us, messing it up, getting in the way. And as chaplains, our role, we're not fixers, we're not psychologists, we're not doctors, we're not our role as chaplains in that is to hold it, notice it, protect the space. Don't tell me about Sharia law. I don't care right now. I care, but not right now. There's something more important. And it has nothing to do with Sharia law. It has to do with your experience, your story, of being victimized, maybe? Whatever it is. It's pain. There's pain there. I was just listening to Dan Siegel is the name to drop today. There's a great metaphor. Trauma is like a dog bite. If you get bitten by a dog, your reaction is to pull back. But the best way to respond is to push into the dog. He'll gag and let go. If you pull back, you're going to have an arm ripped off. And when we experience these seeds,
Or kick you in the throat.
we're going to have to pull back to do that. Jamaicans are going to kick them in the throat. Right? So how can you metaphorically push it into the dog right here?
Now that we've got to that, I feel that when you asked me how you can help me, it's like I wanted to have nuance. You to, I knew that was in me. You asked me to feel something personal, and I did. But I was aware enough that I needed some medicine from Usman to give me more of a nuance, so that fear and hate doesn't come to you.
You're already doing fine.
Is it hate? Is it
Oh yeah, there is some. I don't think Sammy and I dispute that there are some strident, voices out there that we capture, or the Israeli intelligence captures.
Right. We're not talking about anything political. In the moment, in that room,
Well, I'm telling you why you asked me about hate.
I was asking if were you feeling hate?
Yeah, I feel fear and hate when some radical Islamic preachers say, body will, kill the Jews. Yeah, I hate those guys. So that's it. I don't like when they say kill the Jews. Very fine.
when you said you felt powerless in the conversation, that was the tip of the iceberg. You weren't just powerless. You felt, I'm with this guy. I've lived his reality. I've heard kill the Jews in Arabic, and I have a reaction to that. Was that present? Were you aware of that background in that moment?
Yes, I thought that the Islamic harassment and the attacks were like an ISIS day. That I'm straight in my head.
So it sounds like excluding Nasif was more intentional.
No.
If you're aware of it, if you're not aware of it, you're not aware of the reason for something, your exclusion of Nasif is out of ignorance. You're more aware. The more aware you are of your connection with
I was aware in relationship to him. And somehow it came out unconsciously, and when I got into the prayer formation, and that I had excluded someone that didn't deserve to be excluded because he was not of that identity. So there was some cognitive distance. So I think both of them was aware when he was telling me about those guys, killing people, not thinking ISIS. And why wouldn't they think that? And then when I went to prayer formation, which was much later, then that came up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. And the great thing about this is that I think if you, as you continue to reflect on it, Jewish-Muslim relations, your own story, all these pieces, the key is to remain open, curious, as opposed to judgmental of yourself as well.
That's why I came here to challenge
Yeah,
that.
to keep up. Yeah, I just encourage you to keep unraveling the knots. Right? I mean, it's always, and I'll give you a lot of credit. It's awkward in these little offices when someone comes in to talk to one person, and unless you've got work to do, do you kick them out? There's a lot of awkwardness to it. But it also lends itself to these rich kind of questions. Yeah. And
That's all. It is what it is. It's reality.
Can I talk about, for 1 minute, about irrational fear?
irrational fear.
He felt irrational fear. He's talking about that irrational fear that I would like to point out. When you heard of the killings, you said your thoughts were of ISIS.
Sure.
I don't need to explain to you my feelings towards ISIS. I already fully understand how
I do understand.
apart that is to me. My question to you is, how many Jews has ISIS killed?
Right.
Zero is the answer. Everyone that ISIS has killed has been either Muslim, a branch of Muslim, or whatever happened to be the odd Christian who was living in the area. They have not fired a single bullet towards Israel. And yet, your fear is of ISIS. Right? And that's what I'm referring to as irrational fear. They were horrible in destroying enormous important things in our world,
Sure.
the Muslim world. And all their victims have been Muslims,
In Syria,
predominantly.
your families suffered.
All of them. Okay? My wife had 2 mortar bombs, one landed before her, one after her.
Your current wife.
My current wife. So it's immediate. But they represented to you the current enemy. And you didn't say Hezbollah, that actually did inflict some damage on Israel. You referred to ISIS, who is being fought by Hezbollah. So it's a little bit more complicated, but then we simplify it to ourselves, and you're not to blame for that.
Yeah.
We simplify it, we say, it's the white people, it's the black people, it's the Jewish people, it's the Muslim people.
Yes.
I mean,
Listen to
Thank you. Good day. Should we take a quick break? It's 11:30.
yes, it is.
11:30, right?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
7:31.
You've got didactic,
Yep.
verbatim,
Over didactic.
right? Didactic first.
Yeah. You want to do the break, or you want to go?
Yes.
Let's do a 5-minute break.
I need a break. You guys can bring me out. I need Jesus. As long as it doesn't offend Muslim.